Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. Today's guest is Lewis Hackney. He's founder of True Man and host of the same name podcast. And someone who's become a powerful voice in conversations around modern masculinity and men's mental health. But before any of that, Lewis found himself standing on a balcony with an overwhelming urge to jump, despite having what many would have seen as a successful life. Since then, he's turned some of his darkest experiences into a mission to help men find connection, purpose, and a healthier way of being a man. So, Lewis, welcome to the Midlife Men.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share my story. It's been a while since I've shared it, so I'm looking forward to getting in depth with it at least as well.
Well, let's start by, as I said in the intro, let's start with that moment on the balcony. You had a successful agency, partner, life that looked good from the outside, but what was really happening, beneath the surface?
Yeah, I think just to sort of bring it backwards slightly, I was living in London. I was running a marketing agency, as you said. It was doing very well. It was around that wonderful time that seems to be a blip in a lot of people's history now. So the pandemic, and things were going well. Things were going really well, and I made some decisions around the sort of pandemic time, which started to unravel what I had sort of built. And as part of that meant I left London and I moved back up north to Manchester. And yes, it was one of these new flats that Manchester's known for building. Nice gym, a pool, spa facilities, cinema rooms, everything that you could imagine, really. But that sort of purpose had slowly started to disappear. I was no longer running the agency. I was sitting in this flat, confused as to where to go next. The pandemic had shifted a few things for me personally, but also from a business point of view as well. And yeah, my partner at the time, she'd left for the weekend, and I was sat on our sofa watching some TV, and just this horrendous vision of turning the TV off, standing up, walking across the room, opening the balcony doors, and simply flopping over, just kept coming over me and over me and over me. And looking back now, I think it was very apparent. It was a sort of a combination of depression, sort of anxiety of being in the situation I was, but also severe burnout from the amount of pressure that I'd sort of put myself on whilst running that agency in London as well. As you can imagine, 1,800 hours plus. For me, the only logical thing that I could see myself doing was locking that door and leaving the flat and getting into the flat, into the lift. And if anyone has lived in flats before, you may be aware of sort of the post room, where it's sort of an array of sort of little slots for you to get your post. And I remember it as sort of clearly as day. 907 was there, and I just posted the key to the back door into there, heard it clink because there was obviously no post in there, and went upstairs and tried to get some sleep that night. And the next day was just a case of getting up, walking into the bathroom, and again, a very nice apartment, so sink to ceiling mirror, and just looking at essentially the shell of a man that I had become, splashed some extremely cold water on my face, and said, that's the last time we go that deep. And yeah, it all started from there.
Did it come as a surprise? You're sat watching TV, and then this overwhelming urge to do something as significant as jump off your balcony. So, did you realise that the pressure was building, and that it would manifest itself this way?
To be honest with you, no. Like, I was down. Like I think people have sort of been in that space where I feel a bit naff at the moment, feel a bit crap, and just trying to. I'll just keep plodding on and sort of see what happens. But yeah, it was very much an intense wave for sure. It got thicker and thicker and thicker in sort of visibility, if you will. Like, at first it was like just a little voice like, could kill yourself. And then it just sort of grew from there into, like I say, quite a visual sort of idea of how I would do it. And yeah, it did come a little bit left field.
Did you think about calling for help at that point? I mean, it sounds like you took action in your own hands and, went downstairs, got rid of the key. But did you, what, that was your initial instinct, was it, to kind of kick in survival mode in a weird way?
Yeah, it was almost like a fight, like maybe to say, look, the little devil on your shoulder, if you will, do it, don't. Like, that was sort of where it was. It was a very internal sort of battle, but I remember breaking down and sort of crying and saying that I don't really want to die. So I think that was enough to sort of win that. But to answer your question, no, I like to sort of even dig into it a little bit further. I wouldn't know where at that point who to speak to or what to speak to or what to say to anyone in any way, shape or form. It was very lonely. I didn't know people felt that way or had those sort of experiences. It felt very individual. So yeah, there was no vision to seek help.
So what happened next then, Lewis?
Yeah, so like I say, it was a case of I didn't want to be in that situation again. And as to sort of answer your question before, which was I didn't know who to call or what to do. So I very much went into that traditional man, I'm going to solve this myself. And as part of that, I started eating better. I'd really gone off the boil with that. I probably hadn't seen a vegetable or a fruit in a few months. And I also committed to walking 10,000 steps a day, which for me at the time was something I felt I could do and something that I felt was achievable. And yeah, I just really started to try and work on myself a little bit. I'd sort of lost other identities, if you will. So I used to row at university. I used to like working out and those kind of things, and I sort of lost that as I was building the agency. So I think that next step for me was sort of working out that it was essentially burnout without giving it a name or actually speaking to anyone or knowing what it was. I sort of went on my own little path of self-development, if you will. And yeah, it started with eating better and 10,000 steps.
But not long or later that year, you found yourself living back with your mum. So how did that feel then? You'd started this kind of recovery process, but then you found yourself back at home, age 30. How did you feel in terms of, your self-worth or, your identity at that point?
Yeah, it was really tough. It was October of that year, so it was probably the darker months of the year, like metaphorically and physically. It was really tough. I didn't really expect the relationship to end. I mean, looking back at it now, it was over well before my own sort of breakdown, and it was more held together through sort of the pandemic and all of those things that added to that and sort of created that bond, if you will. So looking back in hindsight, that relationship was well over before all of this sort of happened anyway. But thankfully, as I'd mentioned, I'd gone through this sort of process of trying to build a base for myself, this sort of idea of I'm committing to something every day. And yes, it knocked me back, and yes, it put me in a bit of a darker place, but nowhere near the space that I was in, because thankfully I'd started to build this tools of resilience, if you will, of how do I allow knockbacks to hit me. I think one thing, as you said, I was 30, and the irony was it was probably my first big knockback. Life had been pretty good for me. I'd had a pretty good childhood. I'd gone to the university I wanted to go to, and I got a job straight out of university, and everything was going well. So for me, that was my first big knockback, was the end of the agency, and the second one was the end of the relationship. So yes, it took its toll on me, but thankfully I slowly started to build this toolkit of resilience.
And I think this is something, a lot of people experience this. I think we're kind of taught to expect that your life, goes on a trajectory at a kind of 45-degree angle, and it goes up and up and better and better. And in fact, for many of us, there are peaks and troughs, and as you experience, you go from a high and then you go down to a low. But that's not really something which we're taught to expect in life. I mean, how do you think that doesn't set people up very well, does it, for managing those almost feelings of failure, I guess, when your life doesn't go to plan? I mean, what advice would you have? What were you telling yourself at that point to kind of keep going?
Yeah, it's weird looking back on it. You sort of, like I say, you go to school, go to university, find a girl, marry, kids, all of those things. And yeah, the world that we've built has allowed for people to have comfortable lives, if you will, and it is a little bit harder to have that hardship. I was just telling myself that I can do better. It was a very personal development drive. It was very much a case of trying to get back to where I was without damaging myself at the same time, if that makes sense. So trying to get back to a position where I felt that I was successful in myself, but I was looking at it from a number of angles now. So the idea of career or money or a relationship were not the main things that I was focusing on. It was very much within as well. It was like, how was I feeling that day? Was I exercising? Was I eating well? And yeah, it was starting to be a little bit more selfish around that. But there was still, I guess, that male ego element to it of like, let's get back to where we were and then sort of go from there.
And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you next, actually, about this kind of version of masculinity that men are expected to live up to. And often, we fall short of that, or what are your views on men still trying to live up to this version of masculinity, and how is that not serving them?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two angles of thought on this. So you have that traditional protector provider masculinity that still has a chokehold on society and sort of boys and young men and men in general, I think, where this sort of idea of I must earn more than my partner and I must protect them and I must look after my children. And I think that sort of is just deep rooted. But where I'm seeing, I guess, more problems and more things to that is new things are getting added to that. So we have that traditional realm, but now we also have a big push for fatherhood and being a present father. And then we also have being able to run a marathon and eating well and socializing with friends. The plate seems to be getting bigger of modern masculinity without sort of telling men that they don't have to eat it all. And I think that's where it's starting to get a little bit more dangerous. Like a dad in the 50s was just out earning money and probably never saw the family, but he would be classed as a good man. Now, if you did that, you would be a crappy dad and not a very good man. So there is nuances to it, and I think there's part of biology where men are trying to sort of fit into that role, but there's also this new societal pressure of what a good man is and how it's growing rather than evolving.
And that's tough, especially for boys, young men. And I know you spend time talking to young men. What worries you most about the messages that they're receiving about what it means to be a man today?
Yeah, I think it is that. It's that sort of overload and I guess less conversation around everything else. So I look at the feminism movement and I look at how successful that was, and I look at the way that has encouraged girls and women to go into different career paths and look at things outside of tradition, if you will. And I think it's amazing, and I think it was extremely needed, and I'm all for it. I think the problem with it was that as that was happening, there was no conversation for boys or young men around what that meant for them. So, like I say, using that sort of 50s example again, wife and husband knew exactly what they were doing. Now you've got a partner who is also successful and doing well, because you usually attract what you put out there, right? So if you're both doing well in life, you're likely to meet someone that's also doing well. And that sort of changes the dynamic a little bit. And that's okay. But there's just not been a conversation of what that looks like when it comes to fatherhood or parenthood as in general. Like, how has that shifted? How has that changed? And also the dynamics around the house, because you're going to have to put a load of washing on, and you're going to have to help with some cooking at some stage as well, because everything has become a lot more, I guess, blurred and a little bit more open to interpretation. And there just hasn't been any conversation around that. So there are a lot of boys and a lot of men that are hearing things online and then stepping into reality where the two don't fully marry up, if you will.
So there's a kind of disconnection, I guess, from what they're actually experiencing and what they think they should be experiencing. And I know you talk about this idea of no one man. Perhaps you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I think this sort of ties into the idea of what is a man, right? Like, that is the question that I've been asking on my podcast. It's the first question that I ask myself is what makes you a man? And that's sort of the idea, right? Is you need to take a step back and you need to say, this is what I like doing, this is what I don't like doing, this is when I'm happy, this is when I'm sad, and sort of sharing that and looking for someone that fits the opposite side of that puzzle, if you will. I think if you're so ingrained in copying or looking at other people, it's very hard to be your true self. And that is when these sort of problems happen, right? I think, to go all the way back to my story, when I left my job to start the marketing agency, it was post watching a lot of content online about starting your own thing, making 10,000 a month and having all this sort of freedom. You tick a lot of those boxes, and then you seem quite confused as to why you're not content or not happy after you've achieved someone else's goal, essentially. So it's reframing what is a man to essentially what makes you a man, and building it up from there.
So what can you do if you're listening to this and you're feeling unfulfilled or disconnected from your own life, or just a bit lost? What are kind of some small things? I know you talk about level 0. What are some small things that can help? When life feels you don't feel in control of it, it feels a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, I think I'll get to my sort of level 0 concept, but I think to maybe answer this question as well is, like, you use the word perfectly, which is small things. I think there's a bit of a trend or a bit of an idea that you have to throw everything away and you have to start again. And it's like, right, that's it. This isn't working. Move to Thailand and do X, Y, and Z. Like, that isn't the answer to this at all. We are living in reality, and it is sort of assessing where you are yourself. So for me, it is looking at it from a bigger picture. So what is not essentially fulfilling you? Is it job? Is it relationship? Is it family? Is it friends? Like, what is it that you are struggling with? And really start to identify that. And I think once you've identified that, it's very easy to start working backwards. It might not be, I have to end the relationship, but it might be, we've not been on a date in 6 months, 12 months. Like, you want to refresh that and redo that. And it's when you actually look at it from a bird's eye view, if you will, and sort of consider the options, things start to show where you should start to move. But I think the actual answer is, do a small thing, don't do a drastic thing.
So, and that's I guess that's doable, isn't it, for a lot of people? I guess you mentioned this earlier about maybe you yourself starting to be a bit more selfish in terms of looking after yourself. I mean, how important is that? Because a lot of people are so stretched. They're working, they've got families, or maybe they're looking after older parents. There's really very little time to focus on yourself. But how important is that? I mean, can you actually move forward without taking that step and starting to be a bit more selfish, if that's the right word?
Yeah, I think it is the right word. I think it has to be that drastic, right? I think if you just say take some time for yourself, that doesn't hit home as much. And I think when you're looking after people, or you've got career, you've got family, you've got kids, you've got elder relatives, whatever that might be, for you to be at your best, you need to take yourself away, and you need to refresh, and you need to be content in yourself to give the best to those people as well. I think a lot of men are very drained, very holding on to just feel like they are present, whereas they probably want to sort of maybe break down, or they want to go to the pub with their friends. And I think that is really important. So for me, selfishness is the opposite. If you're selfish to yourself a little bit of the time, you can be selfless the rest of the time to everyone else. Whereas if you don't do that, I think you're not giving enough to the people that you want to give to.
So, talking about mental health, men's mental health, I mean, often it's difficult to understand, if you're feeling a bit, angry or upset or depressed, it's often difficult to make a connection, perhaps with poor mental health, because it's not really discussed a huge amount. I mean, what do you do if you are feeling, some of the things that you described at the beginning of this conversation? How do you start to kind of realize and almost diagnose what that might be? Because obviously there's a difference between mental illness and poor mental health. So how do you kind of go about navigating all of that? Because it's quite confusing, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think mental health and mental illness are very different. And I do think the majority of people are suffering from poor mental health rather than mental illness. I think there is a disconnect with sort of passing solutions. So antidepressants as an example, I think that's sort of a shortcut that maybe the NHS sees as a route to solving all this. So for me, I think it's work on the assumption that it's mental health first, and if things still persist, then to sort of seek medical advice from there. But we touched on it, which is that level zero, right? And you see online, you've got 75 Hard, you've got Project 50, you've got all these people that are telling you to get up at 5 a.m., have an ice bath, do this, do that, do the other. And it becomes very overwhelming. And for me, that's not reality. That's not where the world is. And I mentioned it at the very beginning. For me, it was 10,000 steps. It was looking at my diet and eating better. For you, for someone else listening, it could genuinely be get up, get dressed, make a breakfast, and brush your teeth. And whether you do that at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., as long as you've done it that day, you've won that day. And if you keep stacking those wins, you can sort of move forward from there. And that level zero will grow as you grow. So getting up and getting dressed.
And what about, I think a lot of men, especially as they get older, suffer from loneliness. How do you connect with other men? How do you, if you feel like you're the only person in the world going through this, and perhaps your friends have dropped away over the years, how can you address that? I mean, there are support groups out there. What's your advice about actually opening up and talking to somebody?
Yeah, so male loneliness is a real issue, and as you said, a lot of it is men grow apart from each other because they become insular in their own sort of bubbles, and those bubbles either deteriorate or dissipate themselves as kids and things get older. So I encourage men to hold on to friendships as much as they can. I also encourage men to make new friends. The irony of how easy men make friends is hilarious. If you go to a car show and there's a car and you both like the car, you will talk for a very long time about the car and you will become friends. And we've seen successful groups up and down the country, Men's Shed being an example of this. If you like tinkering in sheds, that is the place for you to go and sort of find these things. So for me, I sort of encourage men to find things that they like doing or have liked doing in the past as well. Like a lot of hobbies have drifted with that as well. So it may be something that you've never tried before. It may be something that you did in the past. And I would suggest starting there. And I get it. It's tough and it's not the easiest thing to sort of step out and do those things, which is what brings me back to that level zero. You've got to be in a position for yourself to move forward with these things and get to a point where your level zero is, I go to salsa every Thursday, I play golf every Sunday, whatever it may be. And that takes time. And yeah, I encourage men to try and make friends and continue to make friends as they get older.
You've recently committed to running 12K every day for a year. I know you've been doing that for a while now. Can you tell us a bit more about what that represents and why you've started to do it? Because I imagine this is now well into your recovery, the way that you've overcome what you went through in the past.
Yeah, I think it's day 350 today, which if as of recording this, it's that mini heat wave that we've just gone through. So it's been a tough week for sure. And it's not a traditional distance. It's not a marathon. It's not a half marathon. It's not a 10K. It's 12. It's 12 for a reason. 12 is the number of men that we lose to suicide in the UK every day. So it's very much symbolic in that sense. I've never been a runner. I probably won't be a runner after this. It was very much trying to bring light to that number. And yeah, I think it's testament to show how far I've come. I think it shows that I have that resilience, and I think it really proves that level zero. So for me right now, that level zero is running 12K, and I can do it. So it proves that as you slowly start to level up, we're talking 3.5 years, 4 years for me, and I'm now able to commit to a challenge that old Lewis was probably curl up into a ball on the sofa and not want to even think about running 12K, let alone 350 of them.
So you're just under 2 weeks to go, I guess, until you finish this challenge. What are you going to do? What are you going to do to celebrate that? And what's next?
Yeah. So 2 weeks and a bit. I have a track booked, so the final run will be at a track here in Stoke. It's got friends, family, some other people that have supported the challenge, some businesses, and yeah, just a bit of a celebration, a victory lap, if you will. It's going to be day 366, so a bit like the Tour de France. It's my chance to run through the streets of Paris where no one will overtake me. But no, it'll be really good fun. Hopefully the weather is nice, but not too nice. And then I don't know what next is. I think I have a holiday booked, which I'm super excited for. And yeah, we'll see from there. But there'll definitely be something else. There'll definitely be something in place. I think exercise has come back into my life, which I'm super grateful for. I think a lot of men lose that as they get older. We're starting to see trends, running clubs and those kind of things come out of all of this, but there's still a lack of exercise for older men for sure. So I will continue to exercise, but probably not a challenge just yet.
And so I mentioned right at the beginning that you host your own podcast, the True Men podcast. So if somebody wants to listen to that, what can they expect from your podcast?
Yeah, it's solutions based. So I've interviewed over 100 men now in and around the men's space. So nutritionists, personal trainers, coaches, therapists, you name it, I've had them. More recently, we've had men's groups. So as I mentioned, sort of like that men in shed vibe, things that are options for men. And again, more recently expanded into men's health as well. So looking at prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and all of the other issues that affect men. So for me, True Man is a resource for men. You can dip in and out of any episode that you want. And if there's been an issue or a topic in your life that you want to listen to, there's a 95% chance that there's an episode there for you.
Great. Okay. So you've got a wide range of topics there. And I guess that supports your kind of level zero approach as well. If there's something on everything there that might interest you. And I guess, there's advice, and presumably you're signposting to organizations that can help.
Yeah, it's all there. And yeah, everyone's level zero is different, right? You've got some people that have come from very deep and very dark places and are essentially starting again. They're rebuilding. And you have other men who are successful in life, but lost and don't know where to sort of go next, that second peak, if you will. So there is a whole array of topics for sure. And yeah, everyone who's on is signposted to where they're at as well.
So they just need to look for True Man podcast on any of the main channels.
Yeah, True Man, 2 U's, TRUU Man. Yeah, all of the podcast and YouTube is where you'll find us.
Great. Okay. Let me just ask you one last question then, Lewis. So, and I know we've talked about this already over the course of the last, half hour, 35 minutes, but, someone listening to this is connecting to what you're saying, or it's familiar. We've talked about this level zero approach, small steps, but what someone who's been at the lowest depths, as you were when you had your experience and you're flat. What's the first thing you want them to know in terms of how are they going to get out of the situation they're in and like find a successful way forward?
You hear this a lot, right? It gets better, and I'm a testament to that. And I think what I will caveat that with is that it gets better, but it doesn't get perfect. I think we've spoken about this in this podcast where life ebbs and flows. So what you're actually building is a toolkit to deal with that again. I'm not saying that those thoughts or those feelings or that idea of feeling down will disappear, because it won't. Life will continue to throw things at you. And ironically, the more you grow, the more it throws at you. But what you're actually building is a toolkit, a space that you can deal with these things, and a platform that allows you to reset when things do get bad. If you have something that you can complete every day and it feels like a win, then you're in a much better position than you would have been if you didn't have that.
So apart from the podcast, if people want to contact you, find out more, how do they do that?
Yeah, best place to find me is LinkedIn, at Lewis Hackney. I'm also on Instagram, but if you're interested in the men's stuff, that's the best place to find me. I'm posting pretty much every day around an array of topics. So yeah, LinkedIn.
Right. Okay. Well, look, it just remains for me to thank you, Lewis. Thank you for being open and honest about your experience. I mean, that's what this podcast is all about, is helping men realize that, they're not alone in their experiences. And then, all sharing, all your advice on how to, progress from that point in your life. And good luck with the last 14, 15 days of your challenge. Absolutely fantastic. I hope for people listening to this, we're recording during a heat wave. So, Lewis, I hope you're running at night for the last few ones.
Yes, evening runs are very much the staple at the moment. And thanks once again, Philip, for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for creating a platform that allows men to share as well.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you'd like to learn more about Lewis, visit his website, lewis.hackney.co. And his podcast, the True Men Podcast, that's TRW, a man podcast, can be found on all podcast channels and YouTube. As ever, to help raise the profile of the podcast, it really helps if you can review and follow the show on your podcast platform, and please share it with your networks and people you think might benefit from listening.